Hello, 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 coaches and leaders. I have an incredible author on with me, Nathan Lang-Raad. I actually actively use one of his coaching books in one of the cohorts that I coach. I'm like super pumped to get to hear all of his genius. Today we're going to be talking about high agency coaching and kind of the world around that and ways actually that I think sometimes our environments don't support that and how to even develop agency in low agency or agency restrictive environments. So before we jump in and totally geek out about agency, first I wanted to welcome you to the show, Nathan. I'm so excited you're here.
And thank you so much, Becca, and thank you for your kind words. And it really is a pleasure chatting with you today.
Yeah, yeah. So before we jump in, can you just share with everyone who are you and what do you do in the world?
Yeah, so I am an educator. I am an author, a writer. I'm a speaker, and so I've been a teacher. I've been an elementary principal, a high school principal. I've worked at NASA. I've also been right. It was a lot of
So interesting
fun.
plot twist there.
Yeah, right. I worked in their education office. I've also been a director of curriculum and instruction, and then I've worked in the corporate world as well. So I've worked with ed tech companies, with curriculum companies, and now I am a full-time Rad Education CEO and co-founder, and so I'm doing professional development for school districts and companies across the nation and globe.
I love this. Oh, so great. Oh, what an interesting past. Okay. So you've written all these books, and one of the things that I think that is like currently capturing your attention and passion, and it's mine too, right? So we're gonna have such an interesting conversation, is high agency coaching. So for the folks out there, can you define that for us? What is it?
Yeah, a great question. And I want to say first off that high agency isn't my creation. It is it's becoming a bit of a buzzword in
Hmm.
the business leadership context right now. I first heard it, I believe, on like a Tim Ferriss podcast. He talked about it. And so now, and that's been 5, 6, 7 years ago, and now it's kind of emerged again. And so the, high agency in its basic form refers to an individual's capacity to act independently and make their own free choices. So this kind
Hmm.
of a popularization of high agency is really, focused around kind of like the Silicon Valley tech industries right now. And I would say, if you call someone an high agency person, what does that mean? So I would
Hmm.
say they take action proactively rather than waiting for permission. They refuse to accept constraints. They find creative pathways around obstacles. They maintain personal responsibility. And then they consistently ask themselves, how can I make this happen rather than saying something can't be done? And that's really what it's all about is not getting mired in all of the constraints and all the obstacles.
I love this so much. And this so relates to one of my catalyst mindsets, the ownership mindset, because agency is part of that. Part of it's one of the elements. So the elements of ownership mindsets, agency, optimism, and accountability. And all those things that you named are like part of that having ownership, right? And it's the kind of three little statements I have about ownership mindset is take the reins, believe it's possible, own the outcome. And I feel like that embodies what you said.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it's so easy, especially in this day and time, to get stuck on external factors, stuck on waiting for ideal conditions or waiting for perfect support systems. But to have agency is to essentially, I'm not going to wait for permission or find the perfect time to do this. I know my skills, I know my talents, and so I'm going to go for it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Oh, I'm so excited. Okay, good. So, what inspired you to really deep dive into this high agency world? And, really looking at like shifting from that waiting for permission to finding the creative pathways forward.
Yeah, my focus on high agency coaching really emerged from witnessing countless talented coaches and educators who were feeling constrained by systems. And we all know that education wasn't designed to accommodate innovation. This is not something that
No,
is
it
a surprise.
wasn't.
So, I mean, this kind of a shift from waiting for permission to finding creative pathways forward represents a fundamental mindset change. And so, traditional approaches often position coaches as, implementers. They have these predetermined initiatives. We have to wait for approval from our principal. And I like to think about high agency coaching, flipping the model by starting with the question, what's possible within this current reality rather than, what are we allowed to do? And so I also want to be careful about not just talking about, being a rebel and disruption. And like, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about looking at the protocols in place, looking at the systems in place and thinking about how do we use these kind of like constraints to be able to make education better. So that's what I mean by high agency coaching.
I love this so much. And I'm thinking about, right now I coach coaches and there's just this like waiting for permission, um, kind of culture mentality, right? And I really do want to say it's a culture. It's not like one people, it's not an individual phenomenon. It is a culture phenomenon. This is how, like, I love how you said that. This is how schools were actually built for people to ask for permission.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah. So, okay, I would love a concrete example. What does it look
Yeah.
like
Okay.
for high agency to exist in a school?
Yeah, so thinking about the role of a coach, and there's a couple of examples I have seen, personally where coaches use their agency and became high agency. One is around big initiatives, and many times you think about initiatives as in, okay, we have to implement this as it was passed down to me, or implement this as it was written. And so, for example, I know that I worked with a district who was implementing STEM. And
Hmm.
so they were used to working within a scope and sequence. And so the presupposition was I have to stick with my scope and sequence for math, I have to stick with my scope and sequence for science, and then wherever these kind of natural integration points happen, then that's what I'm confined to. And what we realized was it is really important to stick with the progression of the math standards. That was something that the research showed was going to be highly effective. But we realized that the science scope and sequence really was not designed, it was not built like mathematics, where there has to be a progression of foundational skills and number sense and fluency. It's more topic and conceptual based. And so we had high agency coaches that worked with teachers to say and build a program that allowed them to jump from topic to topic in the science scope and sequence while still adhering to the math scope and sequence. So that's
Yeah.
is one example.
So I actually, my follow-up question to that is, right, when we talk about the environment supporting this, when you were working with this district, did you also work with the decision makers and the bosses of the bosses to, release the reins a little bit and say, and publicly say, it's okay to teach this out of order? Was the environment set up to support this agency?
It was, and I think that's a really important question because you can't just go guns a-blazing and say, "Here's how we're doing things. We're gonna disrupt the system," without regards to leadership, and especially thinking about the culture and what you're working in. If it is a very much a top-down culture, then we have to have leaders on board, making sure that our values align, making sure that we understand what resistance could look like. And so absolutely, we had to communicate that from a leadership level, giving permission for teachers to work outside of a constraint that they thought they were held to. And that's the other surprising part. Is sometimes we discover these rules and structures that aren't even necessary. We just perceive them to be there.
Like they made it up. Like, I'm
Yeah.
allowed to do that? Yes,
Yeah.
you've always been allowed to do that. Oh, so funny. Okay, you said the R word, resistance, and we need to talk about it because resistance is my jam and I love talking about it. So we are going to talk about it. When instructional approach, right? When instructional coaches encounter resistance, what specific strategies do you have that help them kind of locate those openings
Mm.
in the system where change is possible? What's their
Yeah.
entry point?
Yeah, so resistance is one of the first kind of big rocks that coaches have to think through. At first, coaches have to understand what is the true nature of this resistance. Is it about the approach itself? Is it about implementation concerns? Are there deeper issues like trust and capacity? Most of the time, that's what it's about. And so each of those resistant points require different strategies. Second, you have to listen for values alignment. Even in disagreement, you will find some shared values around typically student success. So find common ground, and you can do that with anybody, regardless of how much disagreement is there. I think third, you have to also think about, many times, Becca, we think about change, we think about this huge disruption with all of these ripples that kind of permeate the school culture and structures. But we don't have to do these huge changes that are going to be disruptive. We can look for small scale pilot opportunities. So, most systems are much more comfortable with limited experiments than these wholesale changes. And
Yeah.
then and then within that too, you have to identify allies at different levels. So is there an assistant principal that you're close to? Is there a department chair you're close to? Is there the third grade team lead? Like if you find these allies that are going to help support these changes alongside of you, then you're going to find much more opportunities to be able to spread the positive change with other teachers.
I love this. Okay, good. You just described so many things, the change adoption curve and yeah.
Yes.
And I love you were talking about what's the nature of resistance, and that's that. Thank you for saying that because that is always the entry point. Always, always, always. We ask ourselves, what is the nature of this resistance before
Yes.
we go in, right? We need to throw out these blanket strategies. Here's just strategies. Like what? It's like oh, this kid struggling with reading. Just try any of these strategies. We now know this is not good teaching, right? To just try any reading strategy. But that's what we're doing with resistance right now. We're like, they're experiencing resistance to change, throw a strategy at them. Try this. And it's like, hold on. What's the nature of the resistance?
Yes.
Because that's gonna dictate how what we do next, right? And I love how you said about the common like what common values do we have? And I call that mutual purpose.
Yes.
So, yeah, how do we find mutual purpose? I'm here for these reasons. You're here for these reasons, and I would assert, these values too. This is what we
Yeah.
value,
Yes.
right? And how can we find commonality? Because there's always commonality.
Absolutely.
There just
Yeah.
always is. We're humans.
Yeah.
We have much more in common than we do not in common.
Exactly.
I love this. Okay, good. So okay, so I want to talk about building strategic coalitions now, right?
Yeah.
So you're talking about alliances, and there are these roles. We're part of, schools are a lot an organism, right? And it's roles are different parts of the organism, and uh it is misguided to think that everyone's operating independently, right, within that organism. So, how can all these folks within schools form strategic coalitions?
Yeah, great question. Many times in the coaching world, we automatically form a coalition with our leadership team. So our principals and assistant principals, which these are good things. We need to build relationships with our leaders to help build and manage change. But that sometimes is also a downfall because we don't actually build those relationships across the teaching silos. And so we, maybe we're friends already with the third grade teacher or the biology teacher, but we have not built an effective coalition with the curriculum decision makers or the assessment decision makers at district office or the technology
Hmm.
integration coach. And so we have to find those opportunities to kind of help understand their priorities. And so, when I think about these kind of cross-role collaborative opportunities, vertical team planning is so very important, being able to ensure that we can identify common challenges that, not one single grade level is going to be able to solve alone. And being able to kind of document these successes along the way. So really, the coalition building is proactive problem solving rather than seeking permission. So we are approaching colleagues with, I'm working on this challenge that impacts, both of our areas. Can we explore solutions together rather than, going to your principal saying, can I have your blessing for my idea? Like you go in with confidence to say, I've identified a problem. Here's a potential solution. Can we work this together?
Mhm. It made me think of like this tool does not exist in my world, but like coalition mapping, like what, we're highly aware, schools are highly aware of which teacher teams work together well and which don't. But then, like, how often do we expand the conversation to what teams, active teams, not like because my position puts me in a team, but what active teams do we have working together in the leadership and coaching space in my school? And how am I partnering with the district? Right? Like how, and I don't know, like, wouldn't it be cool if schools like mapped out
Yeah.
what coalitions actually exist from all levels or all roles, right? Like, okay, well, our school actually works really well with the technology person from the district, but never talks to the English language learner person in the district, right? Like, what already exists and what could be, because that brings it back to multiple pathways thinking, right? It's like,
Yes.
oh, this makes me think of all these other possibilities I didn't even think of before.
Yeah, and even you just helped me remind me of even instructional coalitions. So you may have a group of teachers that do a really great job at managing classroom behavior, and you have other teachers who do a
Mm.
great job at creating learning experiences that are authentic and relevant. And so you find these coalitions that you can build even from a pedagogical lens, and then you bring everyone together to start to dream possibilities.
Possibilities, because the truth is we can't see all the possibilities. We think
Yeah.
we can, and we can't. They're infinite. All right. Oh, ooh, I'm like, this is so exciting. I love this so much. Okay. So what are practical techniques you found most effective for helping teachers develop their own high agency mindsets? Mindsets are my jam. So I'm very excited to hear this.
Yes, I know when we were talking before the podcast recording, I love your approach with Catalyst for, thinking about change and mindset. So, yeah, thinking about high agency coaching, we have to model that kind of behavior for teachers as well. So when teachers see you navigating constraints creatively, they begin to recognize possibilities in their own context. And I encourage coaches to work with teachers through kind of micro innovations. So these are small, low risk changes that teachers can implement without significant preparation or resources. So they don't have to ask for the district curriculum coordinator to be able to do these things. These are small kind of micro innovations at the classroom level. And again, the coach is giving permission for that to happen. Developing teacher systems thinking by helping them, map. You talked about mapping earlier, Becca, but map the formal and informal decision structures in their schools. And so, who's responsible for assessment, who's responsible for instructional leadership, and so forth. So understanding where those decisions are made. And once this happens, we can start to see these teacher-led learning communities focus
Yeah.
on problem solving rather than just sharing practices. So teachers are collaboratively addressing challenges, and then they develop their own kind of collective efficacy. So we go from individual high agency to this collective efficacy. And then the last thing I can say about this too is um, developing this asset-based questioning. And so what that looks like, what would this look like if you designed this thing ideally rather
Mhm.
than a deficit-based approach, which would say, why isn't this working? And many times we focus on the system and this isn't working for me. So I'm going from asset based to, or going, sorry, from deficit based to asset based questioning.
Yeah. So, really acknowledging there are definitely definite challenges. Like there are some classrooms where not a lot of learning is happening because it's chaotic. And we do need to address the very thing, right? We're not like, well, what are you strong in, right?
Yeah.
So I want to acknowledge that, and that the default context we go into is deficit based. And to acknowledge that, like, we will automatically start thinking what's wrong and what do we need to fix. And to not do that, we have to be intentional.
Yes, completely agree.
I love it. Okay, we have got to be wrapping up. So, um, what is one high impact action coaches and leaders listening today could take immediately to increase their agency within their current context?
I think the first thing you can do is just map kind of your ecosystem of influence. So
Yeah,
just take
oh,
time. I
good
know you're
idea.
into the mapping. But it is a really great first strategy because you have to map your plan out before you just jump in without a plan. So take time, identify all of your stakeholders who impact your work as a coach,
Mhm.
from like formal authority structures to kind of informal influencers. And so for each person or group, take note of, what are their primary concerns and priorities? Where do your goals align with theirs? What resources or permissions do they control? How do they prefer to communicate and make decisions? Like this mapping process really reveals both the constraints and the opportunities that you may not have recognized. And so this kind of mapping process itself shifts, here's your other favorite word, mindset, from reacting to the system to strategically navigating it. So I think that this single action can create the foundation for all other high agency approaches.
I love this mapping the agency. You're very much inspiring me right now. Mapping the levels of agency throughout our school not system necessarily, but what I mean, the organization, the organizational structure of our school. Where do teachers, coaches, and leaders have agency, and where is there less agency, right? To even just acknowledge what is happening, right? We're not saying there needs to be agency everywhere always,
Yeah.
but where what already exists where agency could be utilized. Okay. Oh, this is so exciting. Okay. So, Nathan, where can folks find out more about you, your books, what you do in the world?
Yeah, you can connect with me. The easiest, most simple way is my website, drlangrad.com. So DRLANGRAA, there's two A's, D.com. You can find my blog there. I write a Substack blog weekly. There's a weekly newsletter called The Learning Curve. Sign up for that. I also have a books tab. I have 12 books there that you can browse. All linked to Amazon. And then you can also contact me there. My email address, everything, all my socials are linked there as well.
Perfect. We'll put some of those links in the show notes. So, in case you're listening in the car and you're like, I need to know this now, stay safe on the road, but you can click on a link instead. So, we'll put those links as well. So, Nathan, thank you so much for sharing all of your thoughts on the show today.
It's been a blast. Thank you so much for having me on the show, Becca.